20 years, between 1855 and 1864, a German immigrant called Frederick Mandelbaum became the richest and most proficient fencer of stolen goods in New York. Part of her success in evading justice was that she had politicians, judges, and police officers in her pocket, whom she also entertained at lavish dinner parties. It was literally a rags to riches story, and this scandal was hidden in plain sight. She was the most successful and notorious handler of stolen goods in American history, becoming known as the Queen of Fences. She had the prowess and capability in managing her criminal enterprise, and was known for providing poor women with career opportunities as pickpockets and thieves, as a pioneer of organized crime. She stood 6 feet tall, weighed 250 pounds, had eyes of a sparrow, the neck of a bear, and fat, florid cheeks. Her tightly rolled black hair was tied up in a bun, and she dressed in fine clothes, adorned with jewelry to exhibit her wealth, and was endowed with enough business acumen to build an empire. Born in 1827 in the Prussian town of Kessel to Jewish parents, not much is known of her early life until she married Wolf Mandelbaum in 1848. They worked as itinerant peddlers before emigrating to the United States in 1850. On arrival in New York, they settled in an area of the Lower East Side, known as Little Germany, moving into an overcrowded tenement building. They both scratched out a living as peddlers, hawking everything from rags to broken timepieces to scraps of silk, carrying their wares on their backs and setting up each morning on the street. Vendors use all manner of tricks to attract attention, by blowing bugles, arranging pieces of fruit in bright, precarious octagons, dressing their horses in trousers, but supply always exceeded demand. 14-hour workdays might yield only $6 a week, and by then they also had 2 sons and 2 daughters to feed. The couple had a stroke of luck, and their fortunes started to improve after what is known as the Panic of 1857, when hundreds of businesses failed, banks closed, and tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. It was a financial crisis that triggered an economic depression in Europe and North America, driven by inflation, rampant speculative investments, mostly in railways, with ripples from economic dislocation in Europe. The Great Chicago Fire in 1871 and the Great Boston Fire the following year all contributed to a massive strain on bank reserves, which, in New York City, plummeted from $50 million to just $17. Hungry children roamed the streets, selling bits of old rope and slivers of coal, and eventually graduated to the less grim business of pickpocketing and looting vendors, activities often sanctioned by their parents. To those who knew her well, she became known as Mom, and she began cultivating trading relationships with these wayward children, buying their wares and reselling them for a profit. She spoke English nearly as well as she did German, which made her a valuable associate to adult thieves as well. In 1854, she and Wolf signed a lease for a building on Clinton Street, opening a haberdashery shop as a front for the illicit dealings at the rear of the premises. By 1855, Mandelbaum became a central figure in New York's criminal underworld, establishing a highly efficient operation, receiving, concealing, and reselling stolen property, all the while also mentoring many pickpockets and thieves, and she would later need to store goods in 2 large warehouses in the city, which she had purchased. She began financing thieves and burglars, and was involved in planning some of the biggest thefts in the city's history, including the Ocean National Bank. Expanding her operations, She controlled several gangs of blackmailers and confidence men, as well as a school known as Marm's Grand Street School to recruit and teach younger criminals how to pickpocket. The Brooklyn Daily Eagle described her as the most respectful and philanthropic receiver of stolen goods in New York. Police Chief George Walling called her a thorough businesswoman and her husband, Wolf, a nonentity. When he died in 1875, leaving Mandelbaum with 4 children, ranging from 8 to 15 years old, she expanded her circle of contacts, networking at her synagogue and the local beer and oyster halls. She became a familiar presence at the so-called 8th Ward Thieves' Exchange, a sort of Gilded Age Walmart in the Bowery, and befriended crooked cops and judges at the nearby 5th District Court. City Hall politicians recognized her growing influence in the 13th Ward and always stopped by her store to say hello, reasoning she could help them rally the Jewish vote, even if, as a woman, she wasn't permitted to cast a ballot herself. She didn't so much join the underworld as adapt it to her needs, treating crime itself as a commodity to barter. No mere receiver of stolen goods, she was, according to the newspapers, the greatest crime promoter of all time, and the person who first put crime in America on a syndicated basis. She dealt in stolen goods of all kinds, such as silk, lace, diamonds, horses, carriages, silverware, gold, stocks and shares, and could estimate the value with a quick and ruthless scan. A large portion of the property looted during the Chicago fire of 1871 ended up in her possession, being sold for a sizable profit. Someone even showed up at her shop with a herd of goats they'd stolen during the fire, and she took them. Her own hands, of course, remained unsullied, leaving it to others to take the risk. As her empire grew, she hired a network of associates, engravers to doctor jewelry, hansom cab drivers for quick getaways, and, perhaps most importantly, defense lawyers Bill Howe and Abe Hummel, paying their firm an annual retainer of $5,000. In all her years in business, she took only one person into her confidence, a man called Herman Stood, who always accompanied her when she went to assess merchandise. One of her sons or daughters came as well, to keep a watch for detectives. As a rule, she would offer 20% of the wholesale value. Sellers had to remain in her sight at all times during the deal, and money changed hands only when the goods were in her possession. After the transaction, Stood would lug the goods to one of her numerous warehouses, or to her home over the shop, where she had a series of hiding places. Her favourite was a chimney with a false back, behind which there was a dumbwaiter, which could be raised or lowered. In case of a suspicious knock on the door, she could gather up an armful of loot and drop it out of sight. Always mindful of competition, she constantly scouted for fresh recruits. She allegedly opened a school on Grand Street, not far from police headquarters, where children could learn from professional pickpockets and thieves. Advanced students might take a course in burglary or safe-blowing, and even training in competence schemes and blackmail. The institution thrived until it enrolled a prominent police official's son, which struck even Mandelbaum as too audacious, so she shut it down. Favoured associates enjoyed the benefits of her Bureau for the Protection of Criminals, a fund that provided bail money and legal representation. By 1880, she was arguably the most successful fence in the United States, selling to dealers in every major city along the East Coast and Canada. Dozens of preeminent bank robbers and thieves sought her business, and she mentored those who displayed exceptional cunning. Through patronage and connections, a criminal called Adam Worth became a notorious international art thief, known as the Napoleon of crime. Mandelbaum was reputedly loyal to her criminal associates. She attained a reputation as a businesswoman whose honesty in criminal matters was absolute. Part of her success was down to never betraying her clients, and when they got into trouble, she arranged bail for them. Her notoriety frequently placed her in the public eye. Her increasing infamy led to numerous mentions and quotes in newspapers, and her ostentatious display of wealth made her a notable and recognizable character. For many years, she operated her business with impunity and was known for meticulously bribing and paying off police, local politicians, and judges. She became one of the city's most prominent hostesses of New York's high society, as well as the underworld, regularly associating with some of the most well-known criminals of the day, as well as judges and police officials. Mandelbaum threw elaborate dinner parties that were decorated with elegant chandeliers and furniture, mostly stolen. Thieves and grifters mingled with bent cops and politicians. Guests washed down lamb and steaks with fine wines and listened as expert safecracker, piano Charlie Bullard, played Beethoven's sonatas. She was so fond of Bullard's playing that when police arrested him for robbery in 1869, she hired a gang of thieves to bust him out of jail. Mandelbaum got so rich during her quarter-century criminal career that she could have lived anywhere in the city, but she opted to remain in a humble building in the Lower East Side. There was a haberdashery shop on the ground floor that served as a front for the fencing activities. By 1855, it had become the front for Mandelbaum's real business. Criminals from throughout the city delivered their stolen goods to her and members of her gang. All items were carefully examined, and any identity marks and labels were removed before she resold them. Her preferred commodities were diamonds, gold, silk, and silverware. She sold the gems and gold to jewelers, the silk to dressmakers and shopkeepers, and the silverware to hoteliers and restaurateurs, as far away as Cincinnati. It was alleged, but not certain, she was involved in the 1869 Ocean National Bank robbery that she had financed, and that she had financed the notorious $3 million heist of the Manhattan Savings Bank in October 1878. She was described as a kind of folk antihero, winning the grudging admiration of her foes. The store sold deeply discounted fabric, ribbons, lace, and trinkets. Her family lived in splendor on the upper floors, the living quarters being like a Versailles-like apartment, with silken draperies, mahogany furniture, and the finest crystal chandeliers, all most certainly stolen. The Lower East Side gatherings at the Mandelbaum home drew titans of industry, as well as corrupt politicians and police, and the crème de la crème of criminality, the foremost shoplifters, housebreakers, and jewel thieves. Despite numerous police inquiries, her extensive network and payoffs allowed her to evade legal consequences for many years. The system for obliterating the identity of stolen goods and moving them through her various warehouses was so efficient and her payoffs to police so extensive that no action against her was successful. Compounding the scandal was that there were corrupt officials in the city, as well as a questionable judiciary and police force that had dishonesty running through its ranks, making it rotten to the core. Finally, in the spring of 1884, New York District Attorney Peter Olney bypassed the police and employed the Pinkerton Detective Agency to infiltrate and act against Mandelbaum's racket. Instead of relying on the city's Jewish police, which Mandelbaum had reportedly been bribing for decades, he hired the Pinkertons to infiltrate the criminal organization, led by Robert Pinkerton himself, to conduct a sting operation. Senior Detective Gustav Frank, using the alias Steen, infiltrated her inner circle. He took lessons from a silk merchant on quality and pricing, posing as Steen, a crooked silk dealer. During a 5-month period, he gained Mandelbaum's trust. She bought from the impostor 12,000 yards of stolen fabric after an introduction from a supposedly loyal client. When the police raided her various warehouses, they discovered the silk Steen had sold her and enough loot to put her away for life. It did not seem possible that so much wealth could be assembled in one spot, one journalist marveled, adding that there seemed to be enough clothes to supply an army. There were trunks filled with precious gems and silverware. Antique furniture was stacked up against a wall. On July the 22nd, on the basis of the evidence accumulated by the Pinkerton detectives, Mandelbaum was arrested for possession of stolen property. She was served with a warrant in her carriage outside her shop. Mandelbaum, her 24-year-old son Julius, and Herman Stood were arrested. She issued a rare public statement. "I keep a dry goods store, and I have for 20 years past. I buy and sell dry goods as other dry goods people do. I have never knowingly bought stolen goods. I have never stolen anything in my life." Being suspicious of judges in Lower Manhattan, Olney arranged the charge to take place in Harlem for grand larceny and receiving stolen property. Newspapers headlined the arrest, "The Queen of Fences held for trial." The arrest and subsequent case received extensive coverage from major New York newspapers, intrigued by the downfall of such a notorious criminal. The use of Pinkerton detectives caused some friction, as can be imagined, with the district attorney's office and the city's police department. The arraignment drew a packed courtroom. Her retained legal advisers, Howe and Hummel, argued her innocence and attempted to discredit Pinkerton detective Gustav Frank, implying he was a criminal. Bail was set at $10,000, $2,000 for each of the 5 charges. Despite round-the-clock surveillance by Pinkerton detectives, Mandelbaum failed to appear in court on December the 4th. In fact, she had fled to Canada, allegedly with a fortune of nearly $1 million. Come the court hearing, when the defendants were called, dead silence reigned. Something like disappointment was heard in the court, and lawyer Howe rose to his feet. "The defendants are not here, Your Honor," he announced. The next day, the New York press located Mandelbaum in Hamilton, Ontario. There was no extradition treaty between Canada and the United States at the time, and she bought a 2-story house, joined an Ash Shalom Hebrew congregation, and owned a dry goods store where she set herself up as an ostensibly law-abiding citizen who donated to charities and worked long hours in her shop, despite expressing regret over leaving New York, once telling a reporter, "I am sorry that I ever left New York. I should have faced the music." Rumor had it that in 1885, when Mandelbaum heard of her youngest daughter, aged 18, had died, donned a disguise, and travelled in a circuitous route by train and private carriage back to New York, where she sneaked into the funeral and watched at a distance. The police ignored her. Reporters asked how she liked Canada. "I'm tired of it," she said, before fleeing back north to exile. She was 66 when she died on February the 26th, 1894, in Hamilton, Ontario, where residents regarded her as a woman of kindly disposition, broad sympathies, and large intelligence.